What's up? It's Jimfro from Ready Check Pull, and when I'm streaming here on YouTube or at twitch.tv/Jimfro, I get asked a ton of questions about UIs and how/why I set up mine the way I do, and if add-ons and things like that are needed to play at a high level. So I'm going to try and break all that down for you so you can better understand what higher end players are doing to maximize their screen real estate. This is going to be a 3-part series that will be broken up into part 1, the default UI only, no add-ons, just the straight up World of Warcraft base UI. Part 2 will focus on what most high-end players consider to be the absolute essential add-ons. Without these add-ons, you're not really able to play the game at even a reasonable level, but the good thing is that with just a small handful of add-ons, you'll be able to perform at the highest level of all content. And finally, part 3 will be a full UI overhaul with ElvUI, which is extremely subjective, so I'm just basically going to walk you through my full UI and why I have it the way I do. So this is part 1, and it's going to focus on the default UI only, and how we can make it the best the default UI can possibly be. There's actually some really great gems in the default UI that aren't obvious to everyone, so let me know in the comments if anything stood out to you. Alright, let's get started with the default action bars, which are pretty much stuck the way they are. They can't be moved without using a standalone add-on like Bartender or a giant add-on suite like ElvUI, so there's not really much we can tailor here. What we can do is first make sure that we have enough slots for all of our abilities. So let's jump into the interface options and enable some settings. Go to the Actions tab and make sure bottom left bar, bottom right bar, and right bar are all checked to give us a bunch of slots to add abilities. While we're here, you're also going to want to select Show Numbers for cooldowns to see how much time is left on your abilities cooldowns rather than just the basic radial shape. When it comes to the action bar's layout, we want to make sure that we have a clear distinction between the different types of abilities, like having your in-combat abilities here, separating your important abilities from the abilities that you want to have available but won't necessarily be pressing all the time, and then sticking your out-of-combat actions way over here to the right. That way they're there when we need them, but they don't take up any space on our main action bars. You can even go further than that and separate your abilities into categories like your main DPS rotation abilities, defensive abilities, and utilities like crowd control and class fantasy abilities. This way, when things get crazy, you'll instantly be able to find the ability you need, especially when starting a new character. Keep in mind that muscle memory is very hard to reprogram, and a full overhaul of your layout will take a few weeks to get used to, but ultimately it will be better in the long run. Now let's move on to nameplates. Right now, the only information we have about our current combat situation pertains to our selected target. We definitely want to be able to see all enemies' current health, buffs, and debuffs so that we can make on-the-fly decisions to help our group even when out of combat. So let's go back to the interface options, and in the Names tab, select Always Show Nameplates. You'll also want to select larger nameplates to make everything just that much easier to read. Then go down to Nameplate Motion Type and select Stacking Nameplates. This is again so that things are more legible rather than being a giant cluster of nothing. You'll also want to make sure that in the NPC names dropdown, you have the hostile, quest, and interactive NPCs option selected. This just allows you to see the NPCs names before you click on them, which I don't even know how people play without this. It's crazy. There's another feature that a lot of people ask about when they watch Zax's stream, which you can find at twitch.tv/ZachZatchi, and that's the personal resource bar below his character. What's amazing about this feature is that it allows you to quickly see what's happening with your character right where your eyes are looking. A lot of people use weak auras to replace the personal resource bar, which we'll talk about in part 2, but if weak auras are something that you're not interested in, this is a great way to see your health, class and spec resources, as well as any important buffs you need to track on your character. It's pretty damn clean too. So now let's work on the unit frames. Unit frames can get a bit redundant in combat if you're already using the personal resource bar and your enemy nameplates are turned on. However, there are some less important buffs and debuffs that show up in the unit frames that don't always show up on the resource bar or nameplates. This means that you can just keep your unit frames where they are, out of the way, or drag them to where 99% of top players put them, and that's in the lower middle of your screen. That way you have quick access to even more information, and you can then right-click your unit frame and in the Move Frame tab, select Cast Bar underneath. This will bring your cast bar closer to your eyes, making it easier to glance at. Now, when in combat, especially if you're a tank, you want to make sure that you know who your current target is attacking. To do this, go to Interface Options, Combat tab, and make sure Target of Target is selected. This will save you a ton of headaches and wasted defensives, and it's just better overall. Okay, so the raid frames I feel are the best part of the default UI, even though a lot of people still reach for add-ons when they might not have to. But you can't really blame them because the default raid frames that you start off with are pretty bad. They leave out a bunch of information, they're tiny, they have a ton of extra art fluff that does nothing but take up space. However, we can fix almost all of these problems and turn these basic raid frames into something that's honestly usable at the highest level. The first thing you need to do is jump into a random raid to work on your raid frames. Once you're in a raid, click on this arrow, click on the eye, and what do you know? We're at the raid profile interface options. You can play with these settings to get them how you like, but this is what I do, and it's what I see most top-end players doing. In the top right, select Use Raid Style Party Frames so that you can maintain a consistent look and feel between a 5-man party and a 20, 30, 40-man raid. Select Keep Groups Together, uncheck Display Incoming Heals. You'll never use this while in combat anyway, so it's just another cluttered distraction. Select Display Power Bars, which is almost exclusively to see where your healer's mana is at. Uncheck Display Border to get rid of a ton of art fluff that we just don't need. Set Display Health Text to none. And I personally like to increase the size of the frame height and frame width to make things easier to read. Click Save to not lose any of your applied settings, and now you can check Unlock, which allows you to move your raid frames as well as adjust the group wrap. If you're healing, you'll need to move the raid frames closer to your character. I like them below my character, but I see a lot of healers who put them on the left or even the right side of their character. Now seriously, these raid frames are pretty much ready for prime time and might even be a better option than some of the top tier add-ons. And now that we set up the default UI correctly, is it possible to raid, PvP, or Mythic Dungeon at the highest level using only the default UI? I doubt it. And even at its best, it's most definitely going to hurt your performance. There's definitely some great things about going default UI only, the main one being that your UI will never need to be updated, but there's also the fact that it's simple with very few things cluttering your vision. However, the things that are missing become more and more apparent the harder the content becomes. Things like audio cues when you're standing in fire, visual debuff announcements, boss ability timers, and even the basics like how much damage and healing you're even doing. That brings us to the next question. Which add-ons do we absolutely need to play at the highest level? Well, subscribe and you'll find out in part 2.